Well, it's one idea that using the repertory leads you to sulfur or to remedies you can find like this. Well, what I would like to explain to you is maybe a few ideas of using the repertory, showing how you can find other remedies as well. Okay? And while in the lectures, the seminars that I give, I'm usually highlighting and walking through a case stepwise using these 7 steps, some of you may know. I will do it different this time. So these steps, I will very briefly run over them. First, we have the patient entering the room, and from that moment on, we need to get the words out of the patient. Verbal, non-verbal, objective, subjective. And we get this lot of information which is not the basis for prescription. We must masticate, digest, reflect about it, and make a homeopathic story out of it. And then when that story has been clarified, then some pieces of information may lead us to a repertory symptom, which is showing rubrics. We put them together, we analyze them in different ways. And we have a repertorization. We differentiate possibilities that are shown. We prescribe, we follow up the patient, and possibly we follow the patient up until beautiful death. No, I won't speak about death today, don't worry. So, in fact, today, this lecture, I was reflecting, I would like to emphasize the middle part of it. That point of change where you know what is important in the case. You found it, you've taken the case, and you know these 1, 2, 3, 4 ideas that are very important in the case, but what to do next? What is the family? What is the remedy? You should be thinking of now that you have this information. And so this tilting point and the way to look at it is using the repertory and giving you hints. I will clarify this first of all with a little case about toothache. And this was a young lady contacting me December 30, 2006, because she had been extracted wisdom teeth. Through general anesthesia, she woke up with pain, with a lot of swelling, but a lot of pain and a lot of swelling that did not respond to the usual painkillers. So they were a little bit in despair, and she gave this story, very short story, that she was sitting in the sofa. She didn't want to rest, however ill and uncomfortable and miserable she felt. And so every now and then she got up to put ice in her mouth onto the teeth, the place of the operation. And she was walking around with the ice cubes in the mouth, on the teeth. Now, the way to look at it is, I would like to explain to you the thinking behind the process. Is that, of course, we like totality. And I've taken this very short case to give you the principle. And it's one idea in the case taking is to go for totality. We're taking the full case to find a remedy that is fitting the whole patient, okay? The whole history. The totality of the symptoms, or the totality of the timeline. But then again, there is another emphasis I believe we must put, and that is the strong and striking symptoms. Short case, acute case, long case, chronic case, even follow-up. Also, I suggest, look for the totality of strong and striking symptoms. So when looking at these symptoms, which I believe most of you can translate into repertory rubrics quite easily, the more strong and striking part for me is what people having a toothache don't do a lot. Putting warm, putting cold, yes. But the need to walk around, even to the point she has to sit, cannot lay down, this is what strikes my mind. Additional information, they took arnica already, they took several doses of hypericum, it didn't change. The pain and the swelling remained. So going to the repertory, I suggest you can find these rubrics. And I'm most interested again in the repertorization to look at the content, the remedies in the rubrics that are most strong and striking first. And this, of course, is the rubric toothache better from walking. And when we repertorize, we see the remedy magnesium carb appearing. Okay? Magnesium carbonicum, looking at the teeth symptoms of magnesium carbonicum, we see there is an affinity for wisdom tooth, which is very nice. And looking at the toothache, we see there is a worse night and worse in bed and worse lying, which is corresponding to the case, and better from moving around than walking, corresponding to the case. The modality of cold water, hot water, warm water is shifting, present in many remedies. You may be aware, both modalities are there, so it's not a differentiator. Dutch dental operation, which is again applicable to the case, and then possibly in the materia medica, to give you the full picture of toothache of magnesia carbonica, is this sensation of elongation or sensation of looseness. So it seemed to be a fit. I prescribe a remedy, tell her to take the Mac Carb 30 every hour on the 30th of December. Date is relevant because the next day she rings me back and tells me within 1 hour after the first dose, the swelling started to lessen. And within a few hours, the pain had become much less, which was on 31st of December, so she could happily eat her New Year evening dinner.
Okay, thank you, and hi. First of all, I would like to thank Homeopathy One, Rajan, and Frederick for this invitation. You know, I became a kind of hermit. I live in the middle of nowhere in Tuscany. I had to go back for my bread and butter to Bologna to work, but I very seldom go to congresses and things like this because in this moment I engage in something else. So I accepted to come here, and as a sign of friendship for our community, I had to skip the collection of my olives, which are waiting for me in Tuscany. Just as a sign of how much I'm really happy to be here to try to share my experience with you. So what we're going to see, it will be just one case in order to try to illustrate a research on which I'm very engaged since more than 20 years ago, and which is the result of this is the second book of my Materia Medica Clinica, which is a work on a kind of kingdom perspective. So first of all, you know, years ago I remember some of our colleagues which really reproached me because I decided to call my approach the method of complexity, saying you will never sell any book because people don't like something difficult. And I think it's important to make a clear differences between what doesn't mean a complexity and what doesn't mean to be complicated, because those things are very different. So complex, you know, I'm Italian, so we have to study luckily Latin in school. Complex, complicated, and simple. They do come from the same root, which is plec. Plec means to bend, to waving in Latin. So when you say something complicated, it means cum plicare in Latin, which is something bent with folds that cannot be open. This is something complicated, okay? Complex means something completely different, because complex, the root, the etymology of this word, is that it cannot be unfolded, it cannot be taken apart, or cannot be explained. This is something complex. While from the same root, simple, which is a simplectere or simplectere, means something that is not complicated, which is just a single part. This is simple, okay? This is simple too. It's another way to do it. Extremely simple. It's a way of being. So, what does it mean when you have to face a complicated problem? A complicated problem is something that we don't like to work with, but it's something where there is always a linear procedure, as you can see. So you can hardly work on this and fragment this way of thinking into different little problems. For example, a space travel is extremely complicated, but you can work easily on that. You just need to have patience and to understand enough. When you have to face a complex problem, the issue is you never have a linear procedure. A complex problem needs always more resources. We just heard what our beautiful Frederick told us. You need to invent, to be open to new resources every time. Every patient is a new situation, is something unknown from the very beginning. The issue is that in nature, in our beautiful Mother Nature, we almost never have linear interaction. These are exceptional issues, mainly in living creatures. So what is typical of a complicated system is the fragility, the rigidity, the not adaptation. What is typical of a complex system is that it is resilient, flexible, and adaptive. Otherwise, we could not exist on this planet. What is typical of a complicated approach in a system is that it's possible to explain and control and predict, even if it's difficult. But in the case of a complex situation, we can just give a look to that. It's always a kind of partial perspective. There is almost never a complete solution. So what happened from the epistemological way of thinking, from the philosophical way of thinking, this about the reductionist approach of our conventional medicine, is that they would like to make us believe that human beings are in some way complicated issue, which is true. If you talk about complexity, the idea of complexity can consider inside of this also something linear. It's not the opposite. So you can do beautiful, technical, as Frederick said before, operation. I am a victim of this. You just, with a little tiny stuff, they can enter in your heart and do something beautiful. This is extremely complicated. It can be done, but it's not a complete explanation of how we live on this planet. And you know that the reality of our experience every day is that we have to cope with complex problems and complex systems. Just to give you an idea of what I mean, I'm not talking about my method, I'm talking about the theory of complexity, which seems to be the most important issue of the last century. Someone says that complexity is a theory, which is not. Complexity is a way of thinking, is a discovery. It's something that was known, in my opinion, really felt and discovered even by the old alchemists, even by Hahnemann, and it was in some way explicated. It became a way of thinking of the most important scientists of the last century, even many doctors, which are not able really to be listened as they should. So it's not just a theory, it's a new paradigm of the way of thinking of human being. So now we're talking about my approach, what I called my way of working, the method of complexity. First of all, I try to use a lot from our literature, from provings, of course, and from clinical experiences, but mainly I try to think in terms of associating concepts and themes. Before Frederick mentioned Masi, we were both students of him many years ago, and he was one of the first who started with this idea of thinking in concepts, using, of course, the symptoms, but trying to associate and to put them together. So, working on this kind of assembling concepts, the concept of similitude is mainly applied between the similitude of these organized together concepts, not just a list, but as an organization of this, and what is the organization of the themes of the patients. Of course, we do consider indispensable the use of good provings, We have Sharon here, who is one of the best masters of this beautiful approach. But of course, if we have to think in a kind of metaphorical way, every proving, in my opinion, is always a map. The territory is the patient. The territory of our materia medica are many patients altogether, and possibly the territory is the experience of several of us that putting together a different kind of perspective can enrich the picture of what we call a remedy. Of course, the problem of differential diagnosis was an issue since the beginning of homeopathy. It's something very important, you know this better than me. And the idea of thinking in terms of grouping remedies, what is called by someone homeopathic families, I started to work on that more than 30 years ago. It's important. In my approach, I don't necessarily use taxonomical classification, but something where the similarity is mainly from an homeopathic perspective. So I would like to give you a look about this case. Usually my approach, before I can write something, because before I can present a case, before I can write this in my books or present even to a congress like this, it's a kind of, what can I tell you, commitment to have at least 4 or 5 cases of the same remedy, where at least I have 4 or 5 years of follow-up, where I never had to change the remedy, not because I'm stubborn, but because it was not necessary. Okay, this is what I do. Of course, I have many cases which are not working like this at all, but I prefer to take only this kind of material. So this is one of the 4 cases of this remedy.